The HOA president called the police before I even had a chance to explain my side. She told the officers I was violating neighborhood property rules. But I had something she clearly wasn't expecting. I had the original documents proving exactly where my property began and ended. I opened the document box I had kept in my truck for years. Inside were deeds, surveys, county records, and official property maps. The first officer began reading through them carefully. Victoria's confident expression started to disappear. The sergeant studied the first page, then turned to the next. He checked the parcel number against the information on his tablet. Everything matched the property I had described. Victoria suddenly asked why they were taking my documents so seriously. I showed them the official boundary map. The line clearly placed a disputed section inside my property. Victoria insisted the HOA had maintained that land for years. But maintenance wasn't the same thing as ownership. Then Officer Ruiz found the document that changed everything. It showed the original ownership history of property. There was no transfer giving the HOA ownership of my land. Victoria's entire argument suddenly had a serious problem. The officers asked us to identify exactly which section of land was disputed. I pointed to the boundaries shown on the county survey. Victoria pointed somewhere completely different. That was when the officers knew someone had been seriously mistaken. I placed the survey across the hood of my truck. The property line was impossible to misunderstand. The officers followed it from one boundary marker to the next. Victoria had been pointing at land that wasn't hers to control. The sergeant finally turned toward Victoria. He explained that HOA rules could not simply override recorded property ownership. She tried to argue one more time, but the officers had already seen enough evidence. The officers weren't interested in HOA rumors or neighborhood gossip. They wanted facts, and my documents gave them exactly that. Victoria realized the police weren't going to remove me from my own property. Instead, they were beginning to question her complaint. By the time the officers finished reading the documents, everything had changed. The complaint that was supposed to intimidate me had exposed the HOA's mistake. Victoria had called the police expecting them to take her side. Instead, they had just discovered why my property records mattered. The sergeant turned the deed over and carefully checked the final page. He compared the parcel number with the information on his tablet. Everything matched the property I had described. Victoria suddenly realized the documents were becoming a problem for her. Officer Ruiz found the exact boundary line on the county survey. It placed a disputed section clearly inside my property. The HOA president immediately claimed the survey must be outdated. But the county seal on the document told a different story. I pulled out the county records that backed up the original deed. There were years of official filings showing the same ownership. The HOA had plenty of neighborhood rules, but none of those rules transferred my property to them. Victoria kept insisting that the neighborhood had always controlled the land. The sergeant asked her for the document proving that claim. She looked toward her attorney. For several seconds, neither of them had an answer. The attorney began searching through every document he had brought. He found HOA bylaws, maintenance agreements, and old neighborhood maps. But none of them contained a valid transfer of ownership. The silence said more than any argument could. To eliminate every doubt, we called for an official property survey. The surveyor arrived with professional equipment and began checking the boundary. Everyone watched as the first marker went into the ground. The truth was about to become impossible to dispute. One marker became 3, then 5. The survey line matched my deed almost perfectly. The HOA's claimed boundary was nowhere close to the legal property line. Victoria finally understood how serious the situation had become. The completed survey confirmed everything my documents had shown. The police now had the deed, the county records, and the independent survey. All 3 pointed to the same conclusion. The disputed property belonged to me. The officers explained that the HOA's complaint could not turn my property into theirs. Victoria had expected me to be treated like a trespasser. Instead, the documents established that I was the property owner. Her own complaint had forced everyone to examine the truth. The police eventually left after the property dispute was properly documented. I stood there holding the same deed that had protected my land all along. The HOA president had called the police expecting me to lose. Instead, The officers had helped reveal exactly who was telling the truth.